Stories, they ignored the homeless man, but he was an undercover CEO testing them. And have you ever wondered if the people closest to you, the ones who claim to care, would still be there if you had absolutely nothing left to offer? If your status, your wealth, your very identity were stripped away, who would truly remain? I decided not to wait to find out. I became a beggar to learn the truth, and the truth was shocking. Why would a man with millions pretend to be homeless? The question itself sounds absurd, doesn't it? I am Elias Vance, and for over 5 decades, I built Vance Innovations from a fledgling startup in a cluttered garage into a global titan. I can still vividly recall the scent of solder and ambition in that tiny, cramped space, the late nights fueled by cheap coffee and an unwavering belief in a better future. My co-founder, a brilliant but cynical engineer named Arthur, used to joke that our first office had more dust bunnies than employees. But we had a vision, to engineer the future, pioneering sustainable energy solutions and advanced materials that quite literally changed the world. My name became synonymous with innovation, wealth, and influence. I had homes in every continent, each a testament to a different triumph, a fleet of luxury vehicles that often sat untouched in climate-controlled garages, and a personal net worth that most people couldn't even fathom. On paper, I had everything. But in my heart, I felt a gnawing emptiness, a profound disillusionment that money simply couldn't fill. The truth was, the very success I had tirelessly pursued had begun to curdle. Vance Innovations, once a beacon of ethical progress, had started to mirror the corporate greed I had always railed against. I remembered fighting tooth and nail in the early days to prioritize environmental impact over profit margins, to invest in our people as much as our patents. Now, the human element, the very core of what made our early work so revolutionary, was slowly being eroded, replaced by cold algorithms and an obsession with quarterly profits. I saw it in the eyes of my executives, in the strategic plans presented in sterile boardrooms. They spoke of human capital and resource optimization, terms that chilled me to the bone, transforming individuals into mere cogs in a relentless machine. It was a language I barely recognized, a philosophy antithetical to the one I had championed. My own grandniece, Celeste, a woman I had hoped would carry on the family legacy, seemed more interested in her social media presence and the latest designer fashion than the ethical implications of our cutting-edge research. I had watched her grow up, a pampered child who never truly understood the value of hard work or genuine connection. She had been given a plum position in PR, a role I had hoped might spark some genuine interest in the company's mission, but she seemed to believe it was merely a glamorous extension of her already gilded life. I saw how she dismissed anyone she deemed beneath her with a casual wave of her hand, or a barely concealed sneer. I remembered a particularly galling incident where she had openly mocked a long-serving janitor for accidentally spilling coffee near her desk, not even bothering to offer an apology or help. Her disdain was so ingrained, so effortless, it was terrifying. Then there was Cassian Dubois, my chief operating officer, a man whose ambition was as sharp as his tailored suits. He was brilliant, undeniably, a strategic mastermind who could dissect a market trend with surgical precision. I had initially been impressed by his relentless drive, his ability to cut through red tape and achieve results. I had given him immense power, trusting his intellect, but a growing unease told me I had perhaps overlooked his lack of a moral compass. To Cassian, people were simply resources to be exploited or liabilities to be managed. Compassion was a weakness, empathy a drain on efficiency. I recalled a heated debate in a board meeting where I advocated for a comprehensive employee wellness program, arguing for the long-term benefits of a healthy, motivated workforce. Cassian had scoffed, presenting a spreadsheet that proved the program was an unnecessary expenditure, a drain on shareholder value, and simply too touchy-feely. He spoke of employees as data points, their well-being a negligible variable in his grand equations of profit. His pragmatism bordered on the pathological. My health wasn't what it used to be either. At 72, the years were catching up, and I found myself contemplating the future of my empire with increasing urgency. A persistent tremor in my left hand, a frequent shortness of breath, the occasional dizzy spell, they were constant reminders of my mortality. Who would inherit it? Who would lead it? Would my life's work be entrusted to those who viewed the world only through the lens of profit and loss, devoid of the very humanity I had sought to embed within its foundations? The thought terrified me. I saw the sycophants, the opportunists, the yes-men who surrounded me, eager to praise my every decision, yet secretly vying for a bigger slice of the pie. They flattered me, certainly, but their eyes held a calculating glint. I felt isolated, trapped in a gilded cage of my own making, a king in a court of vipers. I yearned to see the true character of those who claimed loyalty, those who stood to gain so much from my passing. I needed to peel back the layers of pretense, to strip away the illusion of wealth and power, and see who remained. And so, the seed of an audacious, some might say insane, plan began to sprout in my mind during one of my sleepless nights. What if I disappeared? What if I became utterly insignificant, a nobody, a burden? Would the mask slip? Would their true selves emerge when confronted with someone who could offer them nothing, someone who might even be perceived as a liability, a drain? The idea was born out of desperation, a last, desperate gamble to reclaim a sense of truth before my time ran out. I decided to become a ghost, a forgotten fragment of my own company's past. I meticulously devised the persona of Mr. Abernathy, a frail, disheveled former employee, long retired, now suffering from a fabricated, obscure clerical error regarding a small, forgotten pension payout. I had spent weeks researching old company records, finding a real, albeit long defunct, pension scheme that I could weave my story around. It was a perfect cover. My own company, a place teeming with my own blood and my closest associates, would become my testing ground. I would walk its hallowed halls, not as Elias Vance, the Titan, but as a forgotten old man, a symbol of the very human element they seemed so eager to discard. I would observe, I would listen, and I would learn. And then, I would make my decision. I knew it was a drastic measure, perhaps even cruel in its deception, but I believed the stakes were too high to rely on anything less than the raw, unfiltered truth. So, how did my greedy family treat the poor old uncle? The transformation into Mr. Abernathy was unsettling, even for me. I chose the oldest, most worn clothes I owned, deliberately adding smudges of grime and artificial wear. My shoes, once polished to a mirror sheen, were scuffed and cracked. My hair was matted with a special gel to give it a greasy, unkempt look, and professional makeup artists, who thought they were working on a character for a grim independent film, gave me subtle wrinkles that deepened my existing ones, dark circles under my eyes, and a sallow complexion that spoke of years of hardship and neglect. I practiced a slow, shuffling gait, a slight tremor in my hands that was, at times, genuine, and a perpetually worried expression that mirrored the gnawing anxiety I felt inside. I even developed a soft, hesitant voice, utterly unlike my usual booming pronouncements that had commanded boardrooms for decades. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Elias Vance, the formidable CEO, was gone. In his place stood Mr. Abernathy, a man of no consequence, a forgotten relic. The disguise was so effective, it was almost frightening. The day I arrived at the gleaming, monolithic headquarters of Vance Innovations, the contrast was jarring. The building itself was a monument to modern architecture, all glass, steel, and minimalist design, radiating power and efficiency. Its sleek lines seemed to mock my own stooped form. And I, Mr. Abernathy, stood before it, a smudge of the past on its pristine facade, an unwelcome anachronism. The automatic doors hissed open, revealing a reception area that resembled a high-end art gallery more than an office lobby. Gleaming sculptures caught the light, and abstract paintings adorned the walls. The air was cool, scented with a subtle, expensive fragrance, a scent I had personally chosen years ago for its calming, sophisticated notes. My own creation, now alien to me. The first hurdle was the sleek, young security guard at the front desk. He looked up from his tablet, his expression initially bored, then shifting to one of mild distaste as his eyes swept over my appearance. He was Mark, barely out of college, always impeccably uniformed. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, though his tone suggested I was more of an inconvenience than a visitor, his gaze already drifting back to his screen. Yes, I mumbled, my voice thin and reedy, my practice tremor evident. "I'm Mr. Abernathy. I believe there's a matter concerning my pension. A small error, you see. I worked here for many years, back when it was just a small outfit." I tried to inject a touch of bewildered humility into my voice, forcing my eyes to convey a sense of confusion. He typed on his computer, his brow furrowed, his fingers flying across the keyboard with exasperated efficiency. "Mr. Abernathy? No record. Are you sure you have the right company, sir? Perhaps a different name, a different company entirely?" "Oh, yes, Vance Innovations," I insisted, a slight cough punctuating my words. "From way back. Mr. Elias Vance, he knew me. We used to talk about the early prototypes, the solar collectors that looked like giant sunflowers." I feigned a wistful smile, hoping to invoke some sense of shared history. He cut me off, his patience visibly thinning. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We don't have records of a Mr. Abernathy requiring pension assistance. And frankly, your appearance is quite disruptive to our corporate image. This is a private building." His gaze was firm, dismissive, his hand hovering near a call button. I feigned confusion, a slight cough, and a tremor. But I just need to speak to someone in finance. A quick chat, that's all. It's very important." Just then, a middle-aged woman, impeccably dressed in a sharp navy suit and radiating an aura of frosty efficiency, approached the desk. She was Eleanor, Cashin's executive assistant, a woman who had worked for me for years, starting as a bright-eyed junior secretary. I had personally promoted her twice, recognizing her dedication and sharp mind. She glanced at me, her eyes widening slightly in what I perceived as a flicker of recognition, a brief moment of, "Is that?" but it quickly hardened into a mask of professional disdain, as if she had dismissed the thought as absurd. "Is there a problem, Mark?" she asked the guard, her voice crisp and impatient. "This gentleman claims to be an old employee seeking a pension, but there's no record. And he's causing a scene. He won't leave." Eleanor sighed, a sound of profound annoyance that seemed to emanate from the very depths of her being. She looked at me directly, but her eyes seemed to look through me, as if I were a transparent obstruction. "Sir, if you have a legitimate claim, you need to go through the proper channels online. We do not handle walk-ins for such matters. This is a global corporation, not a local charity. Please, leave quietly, or we'll have to involve building security." Her tone was sharp, final, utterly devoid of warmth. I felt a pang. Eleanor, who I had personally promoted, Eleanor who had once brought me my morning coffee and discussed her children's schooling with me, now saw me as nothing more than a nuisance, a stain on the pristine marble floor. This was only the beginning. My plan involved strategically placing myself in areas where I knew Cashin and Celeste would pass. I spent the morning shuffling through various floors, pretending to be lost, occasionally asking confused questions of junior staff who mostly avoided eye contact, burying themselves in their phones or screens. The air was thick with the scent of ambition and expensive coffee, a constant hum of productivity that seemed to exclude anything old or inefficient. Every glance I received was either pitying, disgusted, or simply blank. I was invisible, a ghost haunting my own castle. I even tried to approach a small group of mid-level managers discussing a new project, asking about the early days of sustainable energy research, hoping to spark some recognition or interest. They politely, but firmly, brushed me off, saying they were too busy and that those old projects were before their time. It was as if the past, my past, had been completely erased. My first target was Cashin Du Bois. I had meticulously studied his routine for days, observing him from a discreet distance from a public building across the street. He always took the express elevator to the 30th floor at precisely 9:15 a.m., usually flanked by his two most ambitious protégés. I positioned myself near the elevator bank, pretending to be examining an abstract piece of art on the wall, my back slightly hunched, my worn briefcase clutched in my trembling hand. Promptly at 9:15, the elevator doors chimed open with a soft sigh, and out strode Cashin, flanked by two younger executives, their voices animated as they discussed projected Q4 earnings, their laughter echoing a little too loudly in the otherwise hushed corridor. He was every inch the powerful COO, sharp suit, custom-made, a confident stride that spoke of utter self-assurance, a glint of ruthless intelligence in his eyes that I had once admired. As they approached, I deliberately stumbled slightly, letting out a small, pained grunt, my old, worn briefcase clattering loudly to the polished floor, its contents spilling slightly. Cashin paused, his conversation faltering for a split second, his irritation palpable. He glanced down at me, his gaze sweeping over my disheveled form like a broom sweeping dust. There was no concern, no flicker of human compassion in his eyes, only a brief flash of annoyance, as if I were a minor obstacle in his meticulously planned day. His face remained impassive, his expression betraying no thought beyond mild inconvenience. "Excuse me," I rasped, bending slowly, painfully, to retrieve my briefcase, scattering a few loose papers that had fallen out. I seem to have lost my way. I was looking for the HR department. My name is Abernathy. I worked here many years ago. There's a small matter of my pension. I made sure to meet his eyes, searching for even a glimmer of recognition, a flicker of humanity. Cashin cut me off with a curt, impatient wave of his hand, not even breaking stride. He didn't offer to help, didn't spare another glance. His voice, usually modulated for executive meetings, was sharp and impatient, cutting through the polished silence of the hallway. "Security," he barked, louder than necessary. One of the young executives immediately reached for his phone, already anticipating the order. "We have a vagrant here disrupting operations. See him out. This is a private building, not a public thoroughfare." His words hit me like a physical blow, even though I had anticipated them. Vagrant. He didn't even bother to hear me out, to verify my claim, or even to offer a modicum of polite dismissal. I was simply a problem, an obstacle to his important morning, a piece of refuse to be swept away. The coldness in his eyes was absolute. He didn't see a human being, let alone a former employee of the company he now controlled, a company whose very foundations I had laid. He saw a liability, something to be removed, an unsightly blight on his perfect corporate landscape. He walked past me, his expensive shoes barely making a sound on the polished marble, his conversation with his executives resuming as if I had never existed, as if the moment had never occurred. It was precisely the reaction I had feared, yet to experience it firsthand, to be dismissed so utterly by a man I had entrusted with so much, was a bitter pill to swallow. I felt a profound disappointment, a confirmation of my worst suspicions about his character. My heart ached for the company I had built, now seemingly devoid of the very soul I had tried to infuse into it. I allowed security to escort me to the ground floor, playing the role of the confused, harmless old man, muttering apologies and pretending to misunderstand their instructions. I could feel their polite but firm hands on my arm, guiding me towards the exit, and I heard their whispered comments about, "poor old fellow," and, "must be confused." My next target was Celeste. Her office was on the 25th floor, a sprawling space with panoramic views, and she was notorious for her late arrivals and her midday coffee runs to the artisanal café downstairs, never settling for the perfectly good coffee brewed in the company's executive lounge. I waited patiently in the lobby, near the sleek, glass-encased coffee bar, pretending to admire a rather garish modern sculpture. Around lunchtime, Celeste swept into the lobby, her laughter echoing a little too loudly, drawing attention. She was on her phone, chatting animatedly about a weekend yacht trip, her designer handbag, an ostentatious piece that probably cost more than some people's annual salaries, swinging carelessly from her wrist. She looked immaculate, radiating an air of effortless glamour, her hair perfectly coiffed, her makeup flawless. As she approached the coffee bar, still engrossed in her call, I managed to position myself directly in her path, just as she hung up, a little frown of annoyance on her face as if the conversation had ended too soon. "Excuse me, young lady," I began, my voice trembling slightly, my eyes wide with feigned earnestness. "Could you perhaps point me towards the Human Resources Department? I'm Mr. Abernathy, and I have a rather perplexing issue with my pension. It's truly a conundrum." Celeste stopped dead, her eyes widening slightly as she took in my appearance. Her perfect smile faltered, replaced by a look of utter bewilderment, then faint disgust. Her nose wrinkled almost imperceptibly, and I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. What is this unsightly person doing here? This is a public relations nightmare. She visibly recoiled, taking a step back as if my very presence might contaminate her expensive clothes, her silk blouse, her tailored trousers. Her perfectly manicured hand went to her mouth, not in shock or concern, but in a gesture of refined disgust, as if she had just smelled something truly foul. "Oh, my goodness," she muttered, her voice dripping with condescension, barely concealing her revulsion. You can't just wander around like this. It's truly dreadful for company image. This is a prestigious organization, not a soup kitchen. The optics are just terrible." She eyed my worn coat with a look of utter revulsion, as if it were crawling with vermin. "Someone needs to do something about this. Honestly, the nerve, to just walk in here looking like that." She didn't wait for a response, didn't offer a suggestion, not even a fake apology. She simply turned on her heel, her expression a mix of embarrassment and indignation, and hurried away, practically fleeing the lobby, her heels clicking rapidly on the polished floor. Her reaction was even more chilling than Cashin's cold dismissal. He saw me as an inconvenience, she saw me as a stain, a blemish on her perfect, privileged world, something that threatened her carefully curated image. My own grandniece, a woman who bore my family name, was repulsed by the mere sight of an old man who might, in her warped perception, tarnish her carefully curated image. It confirmed my fears about her utter superficiality, her complete lack of connection to anything real or compassionate. The future of Vance Innovations in her hands would be a bleak, hollow affair, a company that prioritized image over integrity. I spent the next hour sitting on a bench in a nearby public park, the bitter taste of disappointment in my mouth, the crisp autumn air doing little to lift my spirits. My experiment was yielding results, but they were far more disheartening than I had imagined. I had intended to spend the entire day observing, perhaps even attempting to interact with other board members or senior staff, but the encounters with Cashin and Celeste had drained me, leaving me with a profound sense of failure, not for my disguise, but for the people I had placed in positions of power. I felt a deep weariness, a crushing weight of disillusionment. The park, usually a place of quiet reflection for me, felt cold and empty, mirroring the hollowness I felt inside. Just as I was about to signal my hidden driver to pick me up, ready to abandon the entire charade and retreat into my gilded cage, a soft voice broke through my thoughts. "Excuse me, sir." I looked up, startled, Mr. Abernathy, persona almost slipping. Standing hesitantly before me was a young woman, no older than her early 20s. She wore a simple, professional skirt and blouse, practical rather than fashionable, and her ID badge identified her as Lyra Bellwether, intern. Her eyes, behind a pair of sensible glasses, held a genuine warmth, a touch of concern that immediately set her apart from everyone else I had encountered that day. I remembered seeing her near the reception desk when Cashin had dismissed me. She had been observing, quietly, her eyes following me with a subtle curiosity. She hadn't looked away in disgust or boredom. "Yes?" I asked, my voice still in character, tinged with a weary resignation, bracing myself for another dismissal. She held out a warm, steaming cup of coffee, the aroma of fresh brew wafting towards me. I saw what happened earlier, she said, her voice gentle, almost shy, but steady. With Mr. Du Bois. And then, with Ms. Vance. She paused, a faint flush rising on her cheeks, as if embarrassed by her forthrightness. I just thought, you might need this. It's a little chilly out here, and you look like you could use something warm. I took the cup, my gloved hand trembling slightly, more from the unexpected kindness than from my practiced frailty. The warmth permeated my fingers, a physical comfort that seemed to spread through my entire body, melting some of the bitterness I felt. Thank you, young lady, I managed, my voice hoarse with genuine emotion. That's very kind of you. More than you know. You mentioned something about a pension, and human resources, she asked, her brow furrowed with a genuine attempt to understand, not dismiss. I don't know much about those things, being just an intern, but, there's a community outreach program, a non-profit just a few blocks from here. They help people navigate government services, even old corporate pensions sometimes. They're really good, and they don't turn anyone away. They believe everyone deserves a fair chance. She pulled a crumpled, handwritten note from her pocket, unfolded it carefully, and pressed it into my hand. Here's the address and phone number. My aunt volunteers there. She says they're wonderful, truly dedicated people. She wasn't offering to solve my problem herself, or to take me in, or to give me money from her probably meager intern salary. She was offering practical help, a legitimate pathway, and most importantly, profound empathy. She saw me not as a vagrant, or a disruption, or an unclean entity, but as a human being in need, and she offered the small, selfless act of kindness that was within her means, without judgment or expectation of reward. Her eyes held no judgment, only a quiet, unassuming desire to alleviate a stranger's distress. The contrast between her simple, pure gesture and the calculated cruelty of Cassian and the dismissive disgust of Celeste was like a blinding flash of light, cutting through the gloom that had settled over me. In that moment, a quiet intern named Lyra Bellwether had inadvertently passed my ultimate test with flying colors, restoring a tiny flicker of my faith in humanity. I knew then, with absolute certainty, what I had to do. The future of Vance Innovations, and my legacy, depended on it. But every game has an end, right? The following Monday morning, a crucial board meeting was convened at Vance Innovations. It was an emergency session, shrouded in mystery, called at my personal behest, though the board members believed it was a posthumous directive or a pre-recorded message left by me in anticipation of my impending retirement, or worse. The official agenda stated it was to discuss critical changes to long-term strategic vision and leadership succession, a phrase vague enough to fuel endless speculation. The air in the opulent boardroom was thick with anticipation, laced with a subtle undercurrent of nervousness. Cassian Du Bois was there, radiating his usual aura of self-importance, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips, undoubtedly confident that my absence meant his ascent to the top was imminent. He periodically adjusted his tie, a gesture of contained excitement. Celeste Vance was also present, meticulously coiffed and dressed in an impossibly expensive power suit from a designer label known for its aggressive elegance, her eyes darting around the room, already mentally redecorating my executive suite, imagining her own nameplate on the door. They were both oblivious, basking in the illusion of their impending triumph. The meeting began without me. My longtime legal counsel, Mr. Henderson, a man I trusted implicitly and who was one of the very few privy to my masquerade, stood at the head of the massive, polished mahogany table. He cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping across the expectant faces. Good morning, everyone. As you know, Mr. Elias Vance called this urgent meeting. He has a message for you all regarding the future of Vance Innovations, and indeed, his personal legacy. Cassian leaned forward, a predatory glint in his eye, unable to contain his eagerness. Is this the long-awaited announcement regarding his retirement, Henderson? Or perhaps a new CEO appointment? We are all very keen to understand the future direction. He couldn't hide his eagerness, his words barely masking his thinly veiled ambition. Henderson allowed himself a small, knowing smile, a flicker of amusement in his usually stoic eyes. "In a way, Mr. Du Bois. But first, Mr. Vance wishes to play a short video message he recorded for this very occasion." A large screen descended silently from the ceiling, casting a soft glow. A pre-recorded video of me, Elias Vance, appeared. I was seated in my study, looking every inch the venerable patriarch, but with a serious, unsmiling expression that commanded immediate attention. My voice, clear and resonant, filled the room, amplified by the boardroom's state-of-the-art sound system. "Good morning, esteemed board members, executives, and family," I began, my gaze seemingly fixed on each of them. "For many years, I have poured my life into this company. Vance Innovations was built not just on technology, but on a foundation of integrity, compassion, and a belief that true progress benefits all of humanity. Lately, however, I've observed a disturbing shift. A detachment from these core values, a focus solely on profit, often at the expense of human dignity." I paused, letting my words hang in the air, allowing their weight to sink in. Cashin shifted uncomfortably in his seat, a flicker of something akin to unease crossing his face. Celeste, however, merely looked bored, probably wondering when I would get to the part about her inheritance, perhaps checking her watch discreetly. I decided, I continued, my voice gaining a sharper edge, a subtle steel creeping into its tone, to conduct a little experiment. A test, if you will, of the true character of those I entrusted with my legacy. I wanted to see, firsthand, how the people within Vance Innovations, especially those poised to lead it, would treat someone who held no power, someone who was perceived as utterly insignificant. Someone who, in their eyes, was nothing more than a burden. On the screen, the image of Elias Vance faded, replaced by a grainy, security camera-style footage. It showed Mr. Abernathy shuffling through the lobby of Vance Innovations, his hunched figure and worn clothes starkly contrasting with the gleaming modernity around him. Gasps rippled through the room. Cashin's eyes widened in recognition, a flicker of dawning horror crossing his face as he watched himself on screen. Celeste's perfectly made-up face paled, her mouth falling open in a silent O of disbelief. She leaned forward, clutching the arms of her chair. The footage continued, raw and unedited, showing Mr. Abernathy approaching the reception desk, then the brief, dismissive interaction with Eleanor and the security guard, their faces clearly visible. Then, it cut to the moment Cashin barked, "Security! Vagrant! See him out!" The sound of his own voice, so cold and devoid of empathy, echoed through the stunned silence of the boardroom, a self-incriminating indictment. Cashin's face turned ashen, a sickly shade of green. He tried to speak, to stammer out a denial, but no words came out, only a choked sound. The next clip showed Celeste's encounter. Her visible recoil, her disgusted grimace, her hand flying to her mouth in revulsion, and her haughty remark, "Oh, my goodness. It's truly dreadful for company image. This is a prestigious organization, not a soup kitchen." Her words, once delivered with casual disdain, now sounded like a damning indictment in the echoing silence of the room, magnified by the speakers. Celeste buried her face in her hands, her carefully constructed facade crumbling, soft sobs beginning to escape her. The tension in the room was palpable, suffocating. No one dared to move, to speak, or even to breathe too loudly. They were all collectively holding their breath, waiting for the axe to fall, for the inevitable judgment. The camera then showed Mr. Abernathy, sitting alone on the park bench, head bowed in despair. Then, Lyra Bellwether approached, offering the coffee and the handwritten note. Her quiet kindness, her genuine smile, her gentle demeanor, played out on the large screen, a stark, profound contrast to the preceding acts of cruelty, a beacon of light in the overwhelming darkness. Finally, the screen returned to me, Elias Vance, in my study. My expression was grave, my eyes piercing. I saw everything, I stated, my voice like a hammer blow, resonating with unshakable authority. I heard everything. I learned the truth about those I chose to trust. Just as the video concluded, the boardroom doors swung open with a soft click. Everyone instinctively turned, their heads swiveling as one. And there I stood. Not Mr. Abernathy, in his tattered clothes, but Elias Vance, impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored dark suit, my posture ramrod straight, my silver hair perfectly coiffed, my face clean-shaven, exuding an aura of immense power and unwavering resolve. My presence was electrifying, causing a collective gasp from everyone present. It was as if a ghost had materialized, a living embodiment of their worst fears. Cashin stared at me, his jaw slack, his face now a sickly shade of green, sweat beading on his forehead. He stammered, his voice barely a whisper, "Mr. Vance. But you were that old man." His eyes darted from me to the screen, then back to me, trying to reconcile the two images. I walked slowly to the head of the table, my gaze fixed first on Cashin, then on Celeste, my eyes holding theirs in a grip of steel. "Indeed, Cashin," I said, my voice calm but laced with steel, devoid of any warmth. "I was. And what you saw on that screen, what I witnessed firsthand, was precisely the character I needed to assess. A chief operating officer who labels a former employee, a man who contributed to the very foundations of this company, a vagrant. A man who prioritizes efficiency over human decency." Cashin tried to interject, to stammer out an excuse, but I cut him off, my voice rising slightly as I turned to Celeste. A grandniece who views compassion as a detriment to company image and recoils from those she deems unclean, considering them a blemish on her carefully constructed world. Celeste looked up, tears streaming down her face, her carefully applied makeup smudged, forming dark rivulets. "Uncle Elias, I didn't know it was you. I swear. It was a misunderstanding. I thought he was just some derelict." Her voice was shrill, desperate, but still tinged with a self-preservation that betrayed her. "A misunderstanding, Celeste." I countered, my voice firm and unwavering, tinged with profound disappointment. "Or a stark revelation of the person you truly are when you believe no one important is watching. The person who has no empathy for those less fortunate, for those who cannot benefit you." Your words spoke volumes, Celeste. They painted a picture of a soul utterly devoid of compassion. I turned my gaze to the stunned board members, who sat rigid in their chairs, utterly stunned by the swift, brutal justice they had just witnessed. "Effective immediately," I announced, my voice ringing with authority, making each word a declaration. "Cashin Dubois is terminated from his position as Chief Operating Officer of Vance Innovations. His severance will be the bare minimum required by law, and his shares will be divested from the company. He represents a philosophy that is antithetical to everything Vance Innovations stands for, a philosophy that would ultimately rot this company from the inside out." Cashin sprang to his feet, his face a mask of disbelief and rage, his carefully controlled composure finally shattering. "You can't do this. I'm indispensable. I built this company, Elias. You old fool. You're making a colossal mistake." He slammed his fist on the table, rattling the water glasses. My eyes hardened, narrowing to cold slits. "You built nothing, Cashin. You managed. You optimized. And in doing so, you stripped away its soul, replacing it with spreadsheets and cold calculations. You are a liability, a cancerous growth, and this company will be far better off without you." I nodded to two imposing security guards, who had quietly entered the room and positioned themselves near the door. "Escort Mr. Dubois from the premises. He is no longer welcome here." Cashin was roughly taken by the arms, still sputtering protests and threats, his face contorted in a mask of fury, as he was led out of the boardroom, his shouts echoing down the hall. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Celeste's muffled sobs. Then I turned my attention fully to Celeste, who sat slumped in her chair, sobbing openly, her glamour dissolving into misery. And as for you, Celeste, I continued, my voice tinged with profound disappointment that cut deeper than any anger, your position in public relations is hereby revoked. You are removed from the board of directors. Furthermore, any future inheritance from my estate, or any involvement in the Vance Innovations Trust, is null and void. You have demonstrated a shocking lack of character, a self-absorption that makes you entirely unfit to be associated with a company that aims to serve humanity, not merely profit from it. Celeste wailed, her pleas desperate. No. Uncle Elias, please. I'm sorry. I'll change, I swear. I'll do anything. She reached out a trembling hand towards me. You had your chance, Celeste, I said, my voice firm, unwavering. You had every advantage, every opportunity, every privilege a person could dream of. And you chose to look down on those who needed a hand, to see people as objects of disgust. Your apologies now are hollow, born of fear and self-preservation, not genuine remorse. They ring false. She, too, was quietly but firmly escorted from the room, her cries echoing down the hall, a stark end to her gilded life. My gaze then swept across the remaining board members, who sat rigid, utterly stunned by the swift, brutal justice they had just witnessed, their own complicity in the company's direction undoubtedly weighing on them. And now, I said, my voice softening slightly, a new, hopeful tone replacing the severity, there is one more matter to address. Mr. Henderson, would you please bring in Ms. Lyra Bellwether? Lyra Bellwether entered the boardroom a few moments later, looking utterly bewildered and terrified, her eyes wide as saucers. She was still in her intern's attire, and her eyes were wide with a mix of fear and confusion. She probably thought she was in trouble for giving coffee to a vagrant, or for some other perceived infraction in this formidable setting. She recognized me, of course, from the video that had just played, but her interaction with Mr. Abernathy seemed to weigh heavily on her, a mixture of compassion and potential insubordination. Ms. Bellwether, I said, my voice now gentle, almost paternal, a stark contrast to my earlier tone. Please, come forward. She hesitantly approached the massive boardroom table, her hands clasped nervously in front of her, her gaze flickering between me and the silent, watching board members. Yes, Mr. Vance, she whispered, her voice barely audible, trembling slightly. Do you recognize me, Lyra? I asked, a small, genuine smile playing on my lips, hoping to put her at ease. She nodded, her eyes darting from me to the board members, then back. Yes, sir. From the video. And, from the park. Her cheeks flushed faintly. Indeed, I said, stepping closer to her. And do you remember our conversation in the park? She nodded again, her gaze dropping to the floor. Yes, sir. I wanted to help. You seemed distressed, and it was cold. Her honesty was disarming. I turned to the board, my voice gaining strength and conviction. Ladies and gentlemen, while others in this room, those I had placed in positions of immense power and wealth, saw only a nuisance or a liability, Ms. Bellwether saw a fellow human being in need. She didn't offer grand solutions, she offered a simple, genuine act of kindness, a warm cup of coffee and a legitimate path to assistance, without judgment or expectation of reward. She exemplified the very values I built this company upon, values that have been sorely neglected. Lyra's eyes widened, tears beginning to well up, her hand flying to her mouth. She seemed to be slowly understanding the gravity of the situation, the immense shift that was occurring. Her disbelief was palpable. Lyra Bellwether, I announced, my voice ringing with renewed purpose, reaching every corner of the room, effective immediately, you are no longer an intern. You are hereby appointed as the Vice President of the newly established Vance Philanthropic and Community Initiatives Division. Your mandate will be to ensure that the human element, the compassion that once defined this company, is not only restored but amplified across all our operations and outreach programs. You will report directly to me, and you will have full access to the resources you need to make a tangible difference in the world, to truly serve humanity as this company was always meant to do." Lyra gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes overflowing with tears. She tried to speak, but only choked sounds came out. "Mr. Vance. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Lyra," I said, stepping forward and extending my hand to her. "Your actions spoke volumes. For your immediate needs, a trust fund has been established in your name, with a substantial sum to ensure you can focus entirely on this crucial new role, free from financial worry. Furthermore, a scholarship will be set up in your name to support other deserving young minds who demonstrate similar values of empathy and integrity, ensuring that the next generation of leaders understands what truly matters." She grasped my hand, her fingers trembling, tears streaming freely down her face. "Thank you, sir. I will not let you down. I promise." Her genuine humility, even in the face of such a life-altering reward, her earnestness that shone through her shock, only solidified my decision. She was the future, the true spirit of Vance Innovations. So what happened to them all? Cassian Du Bois, stripped of his power and his carefully cultivated reputation, found himself a pariah in the corporate world. His ruthlessness, once a celebrated trait that earned him accolades and promotions, now became a scarlet letter, a warning. The news of his dismissal and the humiliating video spread like wildfire through the executive circles. No major corporation would touch him, fearing the public backlash and the implicit ethical red flag he represented. He tried to start his own consulting firm, leveraging his strategic genius, but it quickly failed, unable to attract clients who valued integrity over pure profit. He lost his sprawling mansion, his fleet of luxury cars, and his standing in society. He became a cautionary tale, a ghost of his former self, constantly reminded that his calculated cruelty had cost him everything he truly valued. Celeste Vance, once the darling of the social scene, became a pariah overnight. The news of her disinheritance and public shaming spread like wildfire through her shallow circles of friends. Her social media followers, who had flocked to her for her name and her connections, abandoned her just as swiftly as the latest trend. Without the Vance name and wealth to prop her up, her carefully constructed world of appearances collapsed. She tried to leverage her influence for endorsement deals, but her reputation was too tarnished, her image too fractured. She was forced to sell off her expensive belongings, piece by painful piece, and retreated from public life, a shell of her former glamorous self, consumed by bitterness and regret, forever haunted by the memory of her uncle's disappointed gaze. The ultimate punishment for her was not just financial ruin, but the loss of the social validation she craved above all else. As for me, Elias Vance, a profound sense of peace settled over me, a feeling I hadn't truly experienced in decades. The experiment, while painful in its revelations about some, had also brought immense clarity and a renewed purpose to my final years. I had found the true successor to my ideals, not just my wealth. Lyra Bellwether thrived in her new role. Under her compassionate leadership, the Vance Philanthropic and Community Initiatives Division grew exponentially, becoming a beacon of corporate social responsibility. She implemented programs that genuinely uplifted communities, investing in education, sustainable development, and ethical practices across our supply chains, ensuring that every product we sold left a positive mark on the world. She infused the company with a vibrant, human spirit that had been missing for too long, turning the cold, efficient corporation back into a force for good. I remained at her side, mentoring her, guiding her, watching with immense pride as she steered Vance Innovations towards a future where profit and purpose walked hand in hand, where humanity was always at the forefront. I learned my lesson about human nature, a truth more valuable than any fortune. It is not in the grand gestures or the public accolades that true character is revealed, but in the quiet, unassuming moments when we believe no one important is watching. It is in how we treat those who can do nothing for us, those who are perceived as weak, or insignificant, or burdensome, that our true selves are laid bare. It is in the simple, selfless act of kindness extended to a complete stranger that the greatest humanity resides, a spark that can reignite hope in the darkest of times. Our channel is full of stories like this. If you found this tale compelling, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next dive into the depths of human nature. Have you ever been surprised by someone's true colors? Tell me your story in the comments.